Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our last day of The Learner. It is my privilege and honor to present Petrilson Pinheiro, who is professor of the Institute of Language Studies in the Department of Applied Linguistics in the State University of Campinas, Brazil. He coordinates the CNPq group Multiliteracies in Schooling through Hypermedia. He has been developing research on teaching and learning of mother tongue languages through digital information and communication technologies, interface between school and non-school literacies in hypermedia environments, new multiliteracies in teacher education, text production, and ethics on the internet. Thank you, Petrilson. We are very happy to have you with us today.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, good morning. It's a great pleasure to be here today. This event is a special event. I'm so grateful and honored to be here. So thank you very much to the chairs here, my dear friends, Mary Kalantzis, Bill Kolb, and everybody. So everything's so wonderful. Wonderful dinner yesterday as well. Today I will talk about the title of my speech here is from the Utopia of a Cyberdemocracy on Web 2.0 to the fake news in the age of Multisynopticon, critical literacies at stake. Very large title, is it? Well, but my point here today is try to focus on, of course, fake news, but from an epistemological and critical point of view. And when I mention here Web 2.0, I think I'd like to start with some remarks, some things that I think I consider important to bring here. Well, you all know that when Web 2.0 was first coined by Tim O'Reilly in 2005, a lot of scholars started to use this term, including myself, in a very positive way. I mean, just try to think that Web 2.0 now are producers. We create and consume information. So just the second moment of Web 2 would be the second generation of World Wide Web, in which you not just consume information, but you also produce information. Okay, but you also start to see that we are not just we produce, of course, things, but we are also products of this consumption. So, in a way, some scholars start to study as well the exploitation of our creativity on the internet. So, the content we generate is also exploited for different things. So, it creates a kind of paradox of the user-generated content onto Web 2.0. The more you use it, the sharper it gets. So, the more you use it, the sharper it gets. It's a kind of double side. I mean, so there are two sides of the coin. So that's why I like to explore here today these two sides of the coin. Well, okay. Just to talk about, to understand it better from an epistemological point of view, that's my aim here. I'd like to bring here a concept that I first used in 2014, the concept of Multisynopticon. At that time, when I first used it, I just compared this term with two different terms. The first one is the term Panopticon. Originally coined by the philosopher Jeremy Bentham, which was also used for Michel Foucault, French philosopher Michel Foucault. And the motto is the few watch the many. Just think about, I mean, George Orwell's Big Brother, the idea of a panopticon idea of, or the panopticon idea of a classroom, that you have the teacher right in the center and the students one behind the other, and teacher watches everyone, but the students can see each other. So it's basically the panopticon's idea. And in the second moment, Thomas Mathias's paper, late 1990s, published this paper just revisiting Michel Foucault's idea of panopticon, and he coined the term synopticon. And the motto would be right the opposite. So the many watch the few. And I think a good example is the Big Brother, but not Big Brother, George Orwell's Big Brother, but Big Brother TV show, in which, I mean, you have few people there, and you have a lot of people watching these people. So, but there's a very big difference, because while the first one, people are forced to be watched, in the second one, the synopticon, people desire to be watched. And the third one would be the multisynopticon, that the many watch the many. So it's a kind of, okay, so a lot of people, if you have an environment in which you produce things for a lot of people, and a lot of people produce things that you can consume, so you have a many-to-many relationship. But the question is, who are the many? So that's why I'm trying to turn the thing a little bit more complex than it was, I mean, a couple of years ago. But first of all, to understand that, who are the many? The many, first of all, the many is in the audience. So the audience is not is fragmented complex of niched audiences. So the first many is in this audience. We also have many in the producer. So there's no single producer. You have an infinite number of human and non-human producers. So the idea of many is also implicated in this idea of producer. Many is also presented in interaction. So you don't have a linear, symmetrical, and direct sender-receiver structure anymore. So as you have many-to-many relationship. And of course, I think from last years on, we have new non-human actors acting much more than ever. So communication is controlled by automated AI technologies, so algorithmic mediators, so intermediaries, so bots make mediation between people. So when you send something, Instagram, Facebook, so you know. So the idea of, and I just gave at that time some examples, but of course after Brexit, Trump's elections, Bolsonaro elections, things changed a lot. Well, but the point is, and I just like to bring you here the idea to create a counterpoint, because while the first scholars in the first decade of the 21st century saw Web 2.0 as a very positive thing, and I just now bring the other side of the coin. Shoshana Zuboff's breakthrough book, you all probably know, Surveillance Capitalism, is one of the most read books in 2019 when it was first published. And I'd just like to bring here, first of all, some of her quotes to better understand what I'm talking about. Well, first of all, she says that human experience as a free raw material for translation into behavioral data. So she says that now you have behavior future markets, so to control our behavior. But why do people do that? To control our behavior. So just, first of all, the idea that you have prediction products that anticipate what you will do now, soon, or later. So you have a new kind of marketplace for behavioral predictions. And how do they do that? So by automated machine processes, which not only know our behavior, but also shape our behavior at scale. So if you have automated machine process doing this kind of things, you can create this, what she calls behavior future markets. So, and she says that no longer enough to automate information flows about us. This is not enough, because the first idea is that, okay, some companies sell our information data about us to other companies, but they not only do this, but they also create this market to control behavior, to predict what we will do on the internet. So the idea, she says that the final goal is now to automate us. That's a bit shocking when we think about it. To automate us to do whatever they want. Who are they? Well, it's another discussion. And her concept of instrumentarianism. Instrumentarian power knows and shapes human behavior toward others. So toward others' commercial ends, especially commercial ends, but other ends as well. So you have a different kind of power that shapes human behavior. And of course, you can connect to the previous slide when I talked about the Panopticon idea. When you think, okay, the first George Hoyle's idea of Panopticon is very much related. Okay, in the end of the day, okay, what they want is to automate us, just like the Big Brother want to do. So, and the question is, okay, we're now coming back to the Panopticon idea, and that's why I'd like to bring here that the idea of Multisynopticon does not exclude the Panopticon scenario. It includes it. It becomes much more complex because the Multisynopticon includes both the Synopticon and the Panopticon, but at scale, in a different scale, of course. Not if you just can think that you can do it with millions and billions of people. Yeah. Okay, but if I just stop it here, you'd probably say, okay, you had a positive vision of internet 20 years ago or 15 years ago, and now you have a negative vision of internet. But no, I think we have to try to understand this complexity, what I'm calling multisynopticon, in a more dialectical view. And try to understand that, okay, it's not, of course, you have some positive and negative views about it, but try to understand things in a more dialectical view, and that's what I'm trying to show you now by bring some critical view about some quotes from the surveillance capitalism. First one, I think it's quite important to highlight, is technologies as means, not ends. Let's think a little bit about it. Okay, Shoshana Zuboff states, surveillance capitalism is not technology. It's a logic that imbues technology and commands it into action. Technologies are always economic means, not ends in themselves. All right. The first point I'd like to raise here is that technologies, of course, they are means, but they're not only means to an end, but also generators of more advanced technologies and more knowledge. Just think now about ChatGPT, for example. You develop more technologies, including to control people. So the ones who control people depend on this development of this new technology to do different things. So you need to know how it works to think, okay, how far I can go. So in a way, technology is part of this thing and not as a means, only economic means. it's also economic means, but not only that. So technologies are not only something employed by surveillance capitalism. They are part of it. So we need to understand, and Shoshana Zuboff says, okay, you don't need to understand the puppet, but the puppet master. No, and I say that we need to understand the puppet master, how the puppet masters work, what they do, but how puppets work as well. So, because depending on how the puppets develop, some of the puppets masters will also be will change as well. So, and that's why I try to bring this more dialectical view between the technologies and the ones who control them, and people in general, users in general. So that's the first point. Well, the second one, the second quote is surveillance capitalism as a practice of extraction. And I like to focus on this word, extraction. She says, surveillance capitalism is a new economic order that claims human experience as free raw material for hidden commercial practices of extraction, predictions, and sales. And I just highlighted the word extraction. Of course, in a way, it's extraction, but we have to look beyond that, because the idea of extraction assumes that there is something that is already out there waiting to be extracted or mined. A kind of gold or diamond that you go there and soil just to remove it. And that's not, I mean, because you don't think about, human interaction as something just to be extracted. Because digital data is not exactly extracted. They are produced by interactions between users, human, non-human users, okay, service providers, and globally networked infrastructure. So we have to see this, this relationship between these agents, let's call them agents, users, service providers, and globally networked infrastructure to understand. If you understand this relationship, of course, you cannot think of abstraction because interactions change. And of course, when you go there to take something, it depends on, interactions change all the time. And of course, the technologies change because they want to extract information that depends on these interactions that changes all the time. So behavioral data is captured by a complex of web interactions among multiple parties across a distributed network. So you have to understand how they work. And it depends on the different contexts in which they take place. For example, for some companies, it might be interesting to look at some specific interactions, not others. For others, are different. So just think about interactions is a very limited view of the idea, because data is co-generated by interactions between the digital ecosystem and the users. So that's the second point. Okay, and the third one is users as unpaid. She says, surveillance capitalism unilaterally claims human experience as free raw material for translation into behavioral data. And she says, platform users derive any value from online service and that no exchange is involved. So I would say unpaid labor. But I'd raise one question. Why do users come to the platforms in the first place? Why do you think users would use the platforms? Okay, first of all, people want to interact. When you go to Instagram, Facebook, whatever, people want to interact with beloved ones, friends and whatever, and for different purposes, interests. But they first want to interact. And if they want to interact, there's some value in that. So it's, of course, the information they get from us and all this information. They don't pay us for that. But we benefit a little bit about this. First, by interacting with other people. And people also use these platforms for several free information services in a way. So from Google search engine informational services, when you go to Google, to Instagram, entertainment content services as well. And just to give just two examples. And what I'm trying to say is that, okay, I'm not at all defending any practice of what the companies, the big tech companies do. Of course not. And I think I will talk about this later, that they should be regulated. But just to say that what we have is just something that is not paid because they just extract information from us and we don't receive anything back. I think it's much more complex than that. Well, after all, a big question. Can internet harness civic and political participation and engagement? A cyberdemocracy? That's in the title of my, well, of course, when you think about this question, of course, we have to take into consideration that probably the cyberdemocracy we will have is not the one imagined 30 years ago. For example, by the French philosopher Pierre Levy, for example, when he wrote that also the famous book, Cyberdemocracy. The idea of a global village might be a little bit, things would be much more complex than what he imagined maybe 30 years ago. But the point is, I really think cyberdemocracy in terms of local and global participation, political participation and engagement is something really possible. But I think we have to have in mind some points that I consider important. And of course, we can discuss about it. First of all, cyberdemocracy is possible, but needs to be scrutinized by a critical view. How does internet work? You have to understand it. How do human, non-human actors act and interact? So I think the first thing you have to have in mind. Disinformation, when you talk about fake news, is too important to be delegated to few people, some politicians or tech experts. So it's necessary to think an idea of a whole of society approach. If we really want to fight against fake news, you have to have this approach, this whole of society approach to deal with fake news. A call for a shared responsibility among the public sector, business, and civil society. Or there's no other way around. No, not at all. We need also, as I said, more targeted regulation and requirements for big tech companies, of course. What happened now a couple of weeks ago here in Brazil, of course, the lobby of Facebook and Instagram and Google with some Brazilian politicians now, yeah, they didn't approve this project. It's terrible, yeah? But it's important to regulate the big tech to understand how they, for example, they have to they have to know how some algorithms work. It has to be something public. And of course, I'm just thinking about the present, some present actions. But above all, I think, you have to take into consideration a need for a critical education project. And that's my focus, because I'm thinking about the future for the next generations and what they want, if you really want to fight against fake news. And I will focus on this last point. But to think about a critical education project, we have to have an agenda of it. And I just bring some, I think, key points here that I think I consider very important. The first one is that the fight against disinformation must be linked to educational policies for formation of citizenry. It's to involve, okay, and when I say information policies, I mean, of course, from top down, in one way, governments should provide ways for schools, teachers, universities, ways to deal with this formation of what I'm calling formation of citizenry. But also bottom up, because we also need some actions, local actions, that can come from schools, from universities, that can as well deal with that. So why? Because I really think that schools must be the place for deconstruction of information that circulates on the internet for most children and young people today. A space for the formation of critical citizens. Because if you think that most schools are now, maybe we're gonna go in some schools the other way around, because people, when you try to bring some a critical view of some things, some schools have serious problems, because maybe some parents, some families do not agree with that, because they consider that schools should be a place just to teach what they call regular teaching. I mean, regular curriculum, very formal curriculum. Okay, language in a very structural point of view, mathematics, science, and so on. But we have to take to discuss it, to take into consideration. And also, we need to develop tools for identifying and evaluating the information sources on the internet. So to think about the different mechanisms of production and dissemination of what is spread on the internet. So it's not easy, but we have to deal with that if you just want to deal with this formation of critical citizens. And finally, development of internet search procedures based on specific pedagogical parameters that can be taught and more easily incorporated into curricula and teaching materials. And I'll focus on this last one. That's why I'm dealing now with some of my undergraduate students at Unicamp. I think it's quite interesting. We're trying to develop now a teaching material to deal with that. And I just want to bring you here some general points. Of course, in this material we are working now, we try to be more specific about each of these points. That what I'm calling a critical literacy view. So, but first, I'd like to situate here that I try to base these key points I consider important, these parameters, pedagogical parameters, based on the elements of design analysis. Now, first published by Mary Kalantzis and Bill Cope, 2012, and in our book in 2020. So these elements of a design analysis is based on five points. So just to refer, so what do the meanings describe to understand this? So it's to kind of what's going on, a reference of what's going on. And I'm going to show you the next slide that shows there is, I try to link each point to each of these elements, each element here. The second one is the dialogue, so the interaction. How do the meanings connect, interact with people who are interacting? So how can I think about dialogue in dealing with internet search procedures? So that's what I'm going to show. 3, to structure. How does the overall meaning hold together? Yeah. So I try to understand the structure and the quality of what is being produced. 4, to situate. How are the meanings shaped by the context. So here is to understand the whole context, some points, who produced to whom, and whatever. And to intend whose purposes and interests are these meanings designed to serve. So I try to focus on these 5 elements to establish a relationship with the next, and that's now what I'm doing now with my students. This is the next slide. Try to develop critical internet search procedures based on these 5 elements of the design. So the correspondence between the first one, reference, would be in the first one, how to choose the most appropriate search terms on the internet. So it goes from how to use some symbols, some signs that you use for search on the internet, for example, quotation marks, tilde, and many other different symbols you use to take an overall view of these search terms, and how to refine it to more detailed, to carry out a more detailed search. And second one's to check the overall content found and its meaning connected to users, compare it to similar information on other websites. So you just look at this overall content and its meanings, of course, and how this meaning is connected to the users. The users they want. That are interacting there, and also the information on the other websites. So you can now in the second point to check, for example, the veracity as well of the content found, of the veracity of the information of the content found here. Number 3, so the correspondence with the second element, the dialogue. The number 3 is scrutinize the structure and quality of the content found. So that's the structure so try to see the whole structure. For example, the combination between written text and all the multimodal elements used in the web in the infrastructure of the website, and how they are distributed. So you can have with this view, you can try to take a look. Okay, maybe this information is not so correct, and also here you can understand. Okay, maybe I should look to compare to other websites as well. So you go back and then you go here and you have a more specific view about the quality and the structure of the website. Well, number 4 is analyze the context and conditions of access, production, and distribution of the content found and the technologies involved, including human and non-human actors. So, for example, here it's quite interesting because you can when I say analyze the context and conditions of access, for example, of course you can find false information and fake news, but you can also find information which is not fake, but it is out of its context, for example. And people take one information from one context, put it in another, and just to create, different effect. And you think, okay, but it's true. But what that politician said is true, and it's okay. It's quite true. But okay, that's the famous thing. Okay, you said that in a different context. Also, here we should take a look at plagiarism, for example. It's quite important. But when you think about also here the ChatGPT, for example, the idea of plagiarism must be we have to re-simplify this idea of plagiarism, because ChatGPT is not plagiarism in not a strictest sense. It's not plagiarism, because ChatGPT creates something that's not exactly. You cannot find those words on the internet, but you can find information that you can know that this information is taken from ChatGPT or any other bot. Now the Google one, the brand new one that is now together with ChatGPT. And finally, number 5, evaluate the content found based on purposes, interests, and political ideological orientations of the websites and of those people and companies who control them. So, okay. And so the idea here is just to show that maybe some information are not exactly why, for example, some specific website would bring some fake news. What are the interests, the purposes, and how much it is related to its political ideological orientations? So, and of course, and here I'm not advocating to one party or right wing or left wing. Just we have to have a more general view to understand it, but to understand websites and those or control their political and ideological orientations is fundamental for any critical view of the content we find on the internet. Well, just to finish this, these are the 5 points, as I said, based on the 5 elements of the analysis of the design that I'm now dealing with my undergraduate students, and we're trying to create a more detailed view about this and think about some specific courses for teachers in general. And it's been quite an interesting project. And just to finish, just to think that when we think about a critical view of what we're dealing with, you have what comes to my mind is a very famous word from Paulo Freire, conscientização em português, né? And I just like to finish with his quote: "Since the basic condition for conscientization is that its agent must be a subject, conscience being, conscientization, like education, is specifically and exclusively a human process. It is as conscious beings that men are not only in the world, but with the world." Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the inspiring talk that shows that the need for critical digital education, the need to bring the talks in our schools, educate our students for a more critical citizenship in relation to the digital. And now we are going to open for the questions of the audience. Who would like to start? Well, I have a question to start with. So we live in this ecosystem where there are bubbles, confirmation bias, echo chambers, fake news, and we feel kind of imprisoned, right, in this ecosystem that has been built in a way to collect our data, right, and sell us more of the same, like it happens for example, in the Amazon bookstore, right? Amazon tells you what you need to buy. And I find it very important to create practices that break with those bubbles, practices that can show us other discourses that circulate, because in fact we get more and more of the same. What are some of the practices we can develop in order to resist this ecosystem? For sure, educational practices that show how fake news work, but I am also interested in the practices each and every of the users can develop on the internet to trick the algorithms, to break with the bubble, to get in touch with the other discourses that circulate, or we are really stuck in this universe? Thank you.
I think it's a very interesting, difficult question. First, we have to think about how do people want to be in such bubbles? For example, WhatsApp bubbles, or just to give you one example. I think people, in a way, feel more comfortable to be in those bubbles. Yeah, because you share information that you want to listen to see, and you feel comfortable with such information. So, okay, and it's quite interesting now today, because there is one interesting thing is that for nowadays it seems that much more important than if the content is true or not is that, okay, I am the first one to forward it. I mean, to share this content with my friends or my... So it's more important to share content than to check if it is. Why? Because people, okay, you're the first one to know about it. So it seems like, hey, oh no, I received this information from my friend. Oh, okay, so he knows what's going on. So before me. So it's a kind of competition between, okay, shares the first information, that information, no matter if it's true or not. So I think that's the first point. It's quite interesting. And to deal with that is not an easy task, because first, people have to leave those bubbles, at least for to check this information first. Okay, yeah. So it's a change of mindset, in a way, because okay, I want to share this information, but before sharing it, I have to check it. It's very simple, but it's true. I mean, so change people's minds, okay, in a way, because all right, okay, I have to check if it's true, and then I share it. Or at least, okay, I just tell my friend, oh, okay, I know you'd like to share it, but did you check it? Because I checked it, and it's not true, this information. So in a way, okay, I am the first one to say that this information is not true. So this is a different kind of thing. So I think, of course, when you're talking about, I'm talking about people, what people should do. Yeah. But when we're dealing with algorithms, it's very hard to say. When you talk about echo chambers, for example, it's hard to deal with that, because, for example, when you see what, for example, Facebook shows us, exactly, it's because they're controlling the data we have. They know what we are doing on the internet, so they're going to send information about that. But we also have to take into consideration as well. If we know that Facebook does it, okay, so you can also find ways to, okay, I know that I'm receiving this information from Facebook because they know what I'm talking about. They know what I'm doing on the internet. So I will try. I'll be more careful about that. So, but of course, there are other things that should be involved as well. For example, when you have an open source, I mean, when the code is open, for example, some people are more understand. You, in a way, would be more comfortable as well. But I think we should start with a change of mindset. I think people to think about, okay, what the big techs do and what we should do to counterbalance, I mean, this power. Of course, they will continue to have too much power. But of course, as I said here, regulation is fundamental of these big tech companies. But also, these individual actions are important as well.
Yes, please.
Thank you. I'm sorry if I could just speak to that.
More people.
Can I say that was a really insightful presentation? You know, we haven't spoken for years, and that was just fabulous. But it was wonderful to see you give us an interpretive tool. That tool that we created was from our transpositional grammar, the 5 questions, against any mode, whether it's the example you gave or any. You know, what's this about? Who's involved? What's the context? How's it structured? And in whose interest? We need a pedagogical model for that change of mindset. And I'm so grateful to be at this conference and hear you say that. I mean, we teach this interpretive method in our doctoral program. You know, one of our courses is that. But for you to present it as something that's more generally available, it's just wonderful to hear you. And I know people don't understand exactly where it came from, but we do need a grammar for understanding our reality. And you did that well. But my question to you is complicated like this other one. In America, we have this man called Elon Musk, who's a billionaire and who controls this space and talks about, do not interpret it, just let it be. Doesn't matter what's on it. You don't have any pedagogical role. Do not look at the fake news. Do not unpack the fake news. He's the richest person in the world, and this is the message that he gives to the world. So we are battling demons. You know, these are real demons out there who want the analysis that you put up, right, to remain continuously, because they are scraping. You're right, the extraction, the word they use is they scrape everything we do for political purposes, whether it's here to change our political views or to buy things or to imagine how we feel. So what's your thinking about people like this? How do we engage? Regulations is one thing, but in the American context, you'll never get regulation, right? This freedom of speech stuff. So I don't know if you can get it somewhere else. But pedagogically, I think what you're offering is really important. But in the everyday evolution, we still have figures like Elon Musk.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mary. It's not easy, especially when you have those very the ones who control. I mean, the richest people in the world thinking like that. Yeah, but I like to call attention for something that you just mentioned right now, because why do the United States do not regulate these big tech companies? Because of freedom of speech. But of course, freedom of speech is something crucial. But people, I think there is a confusion between freedom of speech, because freedom of speech is, okay, I'm free to, freedom of speech when it deals with my opinion about some things. So freedom of speech applies to opinions, not to facts, not to information. People, there's a very big confusion. When I say the problem of fake news is that fake news is not opinion, should not be opinion, but it's news, and news should be, and you are responsible for. So the idea that the responsibility, so that's why I mentioned in my slide, share the responsibility between civil society. So if the civil society, together with politicians, together, so the whole of society approach, if you think about it, that's the only way to try to put some pressure on those people like that.
But there is a law right now
Yeah.
in one state that says you cannot fact check
Yeah.
anymore. You cannot fact check.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's the. I mean, see, that's the opposite side of freedom of speech. Okay, so if not fact checking, so where's my freedom of speech at all? That's the point. Oh, please. Last one, and then. Okay, first.
Morning, everybody. Thanks, Petrilson. I prepare a question in order to explain in good way. I remember, Petrilson, reading History of Madness, Words and Things. archaeology of knowledge, history of sexuality, 1894, the rebellion on the farm, how to make people monuments in this world, for this world, the same as suggested Jürgen Habermas. A society with character, and a society inclusive, a society critical, and other things.
Yeah, but could you just rephrase exactly your question? Okay, you mentioned Foucault and Habermas, but
Word of the life, with character,
okay,
personality, and unique society, and diversity society.
Yeah, I think that's when I bring the concept of Multisynopticon is that's to show this dialectical view, because you have, from one side you have the individual, and on the other side you have the whole of society. So you have to find ways to these two things get together. Because when this, of course, is connected to what Mary just said. Because when you talk about freedom of speech, that's exactly that. Because freedom of speech is exactly in between the individual and the whole of society. Freedom of speech cannot. Okay, we have to respect the individuality, but of each person, but it cannot surpass what the whole of society think about it. So the individual right cannot be more important than the whole of society thing. That's and I think it's crucial to understand that. And when we talk about fake news, it's exactly that. This shared responsibility shows that, okay, you have the right to share your opinions, and this, I think, when this kind of responsibility you assume as well, of course, and you can. I know what I'm talking about. What I'm saying now here, okay, maybe if somebody doesn't like it, okay, can say it's opinion. Okay, I respect it, and to deal with different opinions is fundamental. But when it cross the border of what it's false, and it's more than disinformation, because disinformation it's a matter of maybe I'm not so much aware if it is true or not, but also if I have intention to spread fake news deliberately. So this has some consequence as well. So it has to be combined. It has to be a joint thing between the whole of society. That's why I think it's crucial, this combination between the individual and the whole of society. But understanding that what I think, take into consideration of the social must be more important than, of course, the individual interests.
We are teachers.
Sorry.
We are archaeologists. We must build persons like monuments, the same as vigilar y castigar, or the same as la arqueología del saber.
I don't know if I answered it, but just. Oh.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your insightful presentation, which let me think. I'm linking my point with Professor Mary. Are we not in this case that we must ask ourselves the question, why are we in this bubble? Why are we not getting the other bubbles to link with this particular bubble of us, which is academic citizenship? Now, every 5 years you give your cyber democracy to that bubble, which I called a political player. And they decide on behalf of me and you what must be fake news, what must be real news. That's number one. Number two, what are we as a learned society doing about that? Secondly, is it not high time that we invite them to this bubble so that they can understand why we have these concerns? Lastly, how to influence that? You need to go to that bubble to influence that bubble. What I'm doing currently, political parties in my country is currently on voter education. And I have now taken that stance to go into that bubble to make a point clear why I want to let my voice raise there. I went to 3 political parties and I expressed what I want to see, what's happened in that bubble of them, because they will decide at the end of the day your well-being, your movement, where you will stay, what will you earn, what will you have. And one example is Elon Musk. By the way, he's a South African. He came from Johannesburg. He see the opportunities in the market. Why he started with ChatGPT? Because he see the opportunity. He did not ask any political party, must I start this particular investment? He sees the opportunity. And we as academics must go into that bubble to make that difference. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, thank you very much. Well, it's quite interesting because when you think about this people's actions, for example, when you're in a bubble, for example, of course, you have to take into consideration some things. For example, power relations. Of course, if you are in a position to say something or not to other people, that I think is one important thing. For example, but there is another thing. When I said just the last question, when you asked me about the bubbles as well, I said, okay, people want to be part of this bubble. So just try to think in a way bubbles as communities of practice, for example, because in a way they are. You feel part of it, so you belong to this community in a way. So do you really want to leave this bubble or to create problems with people there? So that's the first thing that comes in mind. So okay, what should we do? So that's when I'm saying, when I'm talking about the bubbles, I think we have to take into consideration this whole context. But I'm talking about from an individual point of view. I mean, the person and what people can do when you are in such a bubble. But you're right when you say, okay, you can, is a kind of feedback movement as well. If you start a movement as well, okay, you can teach these people, okay, all right, you're sharing this information, but okay, let's check it. So what are the possibilities to deal with this information? But it's so hard because people want to listen to things they like, they enjoy. They are very much, it's not easy because they really want to be a part of it. They want to believe in such a things. So it's not easy to change because it's much easier to believe in something that is, it's part of my world, my life. I don't want to change it. Okay, it's and we could see this very clearly. For example, in the last election here in Brazil, you know what I'm talking about. You all know. So I don't need to use names here to mention names, but you know. And how? I mean, and it almost decided. It decided in 2018 the elections results, but it almost decided this last year as well. So it was very hard task. But because of that, because people want to be part, so this movement to change people's minds is something hard. It's not easy. But could you made another question, but you just made some comments, and just I think I lost the first question. Your first question. Yeah, but this connects with the idea of an educational project. Yeah, I cannot see any other possibility to deal with that. Because if you don't have, I'm just thinking about the future. So my first comment is about the present, of course, people can do now. But when you think about education project about this, it's for future, for the next generations to deal with that. And we have to believe that this, and the idea, Paulo Freire's idea of conscientization goes in that direction. Because it's exactly it's much wider than the idea of individual. Conscientization involves necessarily the whole of society. So that's why it should be part of an educational project.
Can I say something? Okay, it's my turn. Can you hear me well with the mask? Yes.
But I think it's not.
Yeah, this is the advantage of speaking
no, it's
so
not,
loud.
It's not working.
Yeah. Okay, it's working. Can you hear me well? Yeah. Okay, even with the mask, right? This is the advantage of speaking so loud. Never learned how to speak lower, in a low voice. Anyway. So, yeah, I thank you very much for all the insights that you bring us, right, Petrilson. I would like to add and to make a few comments, about education. Education has been making me crazy, to rethink so many things. So, in terms of consciousness or conscientization and awareness, what I come, now that I've experienced so much in my life and so much in education, I think that there are some concepts that should be rethought in our schools. Whenever we think of curriculum, whenever we think of educating people, whenever we think of justice and everything else. For example, one of the ideas for me is exactly freedom. One is this, right? Because I suspect that the concept of freedom has been disseminated in a very romantic way. Many people believe in education there is absolute freedom, That reminds me of my times in the 60s as well. But anyway, there is no absolute freedom according to what we've been discussing, right? So I think schools should be much more aware of this whenever we talk about freedom of speech, because there is no absolute freedom. Freedom has been a socially created concept at a certain moment of our history and of our interests in society, for example, right? Let me see. There is also another concept that should be reviewed in schools. That is this idea that we are subjects. We are not objects. And many schools many times work with the concept that we cannot have a subjective interpretation of things, for example. People forget that we are mini makers many times. Schools forget that. And also another idea that I've been thinking about is that many people believe that learning how to read and write is a spontaneous thing expected by society. They have already naturalized, but what I mean by that is many people are not aware that behind all this technology of learning how to read and write, many people are shaped. We are all shaped to become subjects according to a philosophy of society, according to a society that really is predominant at a certain place. Here in Brazil, we have this kind of society very much influenced by neoliberalism, of course, by capitalism, as many other countries, right? So I think this is very much what people should be thinking about, rethinking, okay, in terms of education, right? Okay, just to say that this idea made me think about the freedom of speech. What is that?
Yeah, but it's exactly that. When you think about, Valkyria, thank you very much for your comments. To deal with, for example, when some schools treat students as objects, it's exactly that when some politicians want, some of them want. When they, for example, prohibit, for example, projects that should discuss, for example, gender or relations or sexuality or thing. Schools, for example, because they'd say it's prohibited because schools should not do that. Students are there just to receive information. It's a kind of, bank idea of Paulo Freire as well. You just people deposit and withdraw information from your mind. So it's a kind of, and that's why we think, when we think about students, when we think about educational projects, the one I showed here is just exactly to show that how we can change a little bit or think about students as subjects, as you said. And I think that's why it's so important. And of course, the meaning, freedom of speech, this liberal concept of freedom of speech is quite an interesting thing. Because I just visited China 2019, and I had an interesting impression because, okay, people say, all over the world say, okay, but the Chinese people are watched all the time by the government. Yeah, it's true. It's true, no doubt. But the ones who say that, think that, okay, in Brazil, people are not watched. So at least the Chinese people know that they're being watched, and by whom? But here, people don't, okay, you are watched as well, but not by the government, but by Google. So, it's just, I mean, the actors are different, but we are being watched by different actors. So that's, I think, so this links with the idea of freedom of speech as well. It's the liberal idea of freedom of speech. Thank you very much.
We thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you, Mary. Thank you.